Hi, I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? Today, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about The Neverending Story, the 1984 film, with my sister, Tracie Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people.
So, Trace, tell me what you know about The Neverending Story.
I remember seeing it the first time. I know Chris was with us, our cousin, the first time I saw it. I don't think it was in the theater. I have this vague recollection of it being like at their apartment or house or whatever. But I don't know if that's actually possible. Anyway, it's been a really, really long time since I've seen that movie. And the things I remember are like the moments of like extreme emotionality. So like I have strong memories of the horse. Mm-hmm. It's Atreyu, right?
Atreyu, the boy.
And like the horse, like, come on, you stupid horse. And the horse is like chest deep in quicksand or something. Mm-hmm. And like I just remember like crying like crazy at that. And I remember feeling an affinity for the boy reading Bastian. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Bastian.
Like running from bullies and like reading. Like I remember feeling an affinity because of the reading and being like really slightly confused by the childlike empress. Like that was a good thing that she was childlike and like her one perfect crystal tear at one point. Like being just sort of confused by everything about her. Oh, and the emotionality again of like the big rock guy who's, if he has a name, I don't remember, saying like looking at his hands and being like, they look like strong hands. And then you realize it's because he couldn't hold on to his friends and they're all in the nothing. So that's what I remember about The Neverending Story. But why are we talking about it today, Em?
So I loved this movie growing up. And I know that I watched it over and over again when I was in my late 20s, maybe a little younger, but I was definitely an adult. Dad gave me a DVD of this movie. And because he'd seen it and he thought of me. And when he gave it to me, he said, of all the movies that you watched over and over again, the one that I considered taking a hammer to was this one. Which actually had me a little nervous because I was like, oh, is this one I can't go home again? And it holds up. I can understand why an adult would get tired of it. But it was not what I was afraid of. So I want to talk about, there's a couple of reasons why I want to talk about this movie. I loved it and I revisited it recently with my kids who also mostly loved it. And so that's part of why I want to talk about it, about what's enduring about it, what it holds up, even though it is nearly a 40-year-old movie at this point with 40-year-old special effects. And it is also a movie that rests on the shoulders of 3 child actors who you get what you get with child acting. They do a phenomenal job, but they're kids. And I think that's actually what Dad was responding to. There's not a whole lot of nuance in child acting. So I want to talk about that, about what's enduring. But I also want to talk a little bit about what this movie says about storytelling, what it says about the role of the reader or viewer in storytelling. And also, I kind of want to talk a little bit about adaptations because Michael Ende, who was the author of the book, The Neverending Story, hated this movie so much that he actually sued to keep it from being released.
Wow.
And obviously failed. And so I want to talk a little bit about adaptations and what that means to creators. And then finally, in part because Michael Ende was German. He was born in 1926. And so his formative years, he lived through Nazi Germany. And this book, and then the other book of his that I read, Momo, are very much anti-authoritarianism.
Mm.
And so I want to talk, and that has something to do with why he hated this film version of it. Although I don't think that the message was as lost as he thinks it is. So those are all the things that I kind of want to talk about this movie.
Wow. Okay, cool. Let's dig in.
So I'm going to tell just kind of what happens in the movie. The movie starts off with a little boy, Bastian Balthazar Bucks is his name.
Don't say that 3 times fast.
Yeah. And he is about 10 years old. His mother has died. His father, who's played by Major Dad, Gerald McRaney, is kind of emotionally distant and is telling him, you need to get your head out of the clouds, keep your feet on the ground. Apparently he's been drawing unicorns on his math homework instead of actually doing his homework. On his way to school, he is chased by 3 bullies who end up putting him into a garbage can. They start to run after him again after he's gotten himself out, and he ducks into an old bookshop. It's Carl Conrad Coriander, because apparently Michael Ende likes
triple alliteration.
Yes. And in the book, if I remember correctly, those are all Ks. They make it Cs in the movie.
Well, if he was German, then the Ks make more sense. Yeah. Although KKK is not, for an American audience, not good initials to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mr. Coriander is reading a book, and Bastian ends up talking to him about it. Like, what are you reading? He said, well, this book is not safe. He's like, what are you talking about? And he says, well, when you're reading, Jules Verne, do you feel like you have become Captain Nemo? And he's like, yeah, that's what I like about it. And he's like, well, you get to be a little boy again when it's over, because your books are safe. This one is not safe. Mm. So then there's a phone call, and Mr. Coriander goes to the back of the shop. And so Bastian steals the book, which is titled The Neverending Story. And it's not just an image, it's like a seal on the front that is 2 snakes writhing around biting each
almost.
Other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes to school. He's late, which was part of what he talked about with his dad that morning. So he goes to the attic of the school and gets started reading. So the story is that the land of Fantasia is in danger because of something called the Nothing. And when the Nothing comes, it just gets rid of things. There's nothing there. And so we meet several people who are going to the Ivory Tower to meet with the Childlike Empress who rules Fantasia to find out what to do about the Nothing. When they get there, they're met by her advisor, Chiron, who says that she is ill and it is related to the Nothing. Her illness and the Nothing are connected to each other. And so if we can cure her, that will solve the problem with the Nothing. And they have sent for a warrior named Atreyu to go to find the cure. He is given Atreyu, turns out to be another little boy who is about 12. He's given the Orin, which is the image that's on the front of the book, that is the 2 snakes, that is to keep him safe. And he goes out with his horse Artax to find a cure. First place he goes is the Swamps of Sadness, where there is Morla, the aged one, who turns out to be a giant tortoise or turtle, who says he must go 1,000 miles away, or maybe it's 10,000 miles away, to the Southern Oracle. That heartrending scene happens where the Swamps of Sadness start to take over Artax, the horse, and he sinks into the swamps, and Atreyu is heartbroken. Meanwhile, Bastian is crying in the attic as well. And even though he has the Orin, which is supposed to keep him safe, Atreyu is nearly taken in by the Swamps of Sadness too. But with luck, the luck dragon Falkor finds him and flies him to the Southern Oracle. There,
I had forgotten the dragon. He looks a little like a. What kind of dog was Roscoe?
A Cocker Spaniel. He looks a little like a Cocker Spaniel. He's got Cocker Spaniel ears.
Yeah, he kind of has like a Cocker Spaniel-esque face.
Yeah, he's kind of like if a Cocker Spaniel were a Chinese dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. Falkor. I'd totally forgotten about Falkor. That's making me happy. Okay. Carry on.
So he goes to the Southern Oracle, where he meets Engiwook and Urgel, who are a married couple who argue with each other. Engiwook is the foremost authority on the Southern Oracle. There are 3 gates. The first you have to get past by believing that you can. It can really hurt people, can destroy people who don't believe in themselves. And so Atreyu gets past that gate. The second gate is the magic mirror gate that shows you who you truly are. And it's terrifying because people who are kind find that they're truly cruel. People who are brave find that they're actually cowards. Well, Atreyu gets to that gate and he sees Bastian. And then finally he gets the oracle who tells him that the childlike empress needs a new name from a human child. The Nothing comes and starts to destroy the Southern Oracle. Atreyu and Falkor go to try to figure out where the boundaries of Fantasia are so they can bring a human child from beyond the boundaries to give her a new name. Atreyu and Falkor get separated, and that's when Atreyu ends up on an island where the rock biter is, where they look like such good, big, strong hands, and says that he's just waiting for the Nothing to get him. Atreyu finds these murals of everything he's been through that are quite ancient, as if it happened long before he was born, even though it's just happened to him. And then he finds Gmork, which is the wolf that was the agent of the Nothing that was sent out to kill him, kill Atreyu. Even though there's very little time left, the Nothing is coming. He's lost his luck dragon. He's lost the Orin. Atreyu says, well, if we're going to die anyway, I'd rather die fighting. Come for me, Gmork. And they have a fight, and Atreyu is able to kill him. Finally, Falkor finds him. There is nothing left of Fantasia except for the ivory tower. Atreyu goes in to talk to the childlike empress and say that he has failed. And she says, no, you haven't. You've brought the boy with you, the human child, and he already has a name picked out. All he has to do is call it out. Bastian has prior to this, we've seen him say like, oh, my mother had the most beautiful name. I wish they would ask me. But he keeps saying like, this can't be me. It can't be real. The Nothing comes for the ivory tower. Atreyu falls, presumably dead. And Bastian is like devastated and cannot believe that this is really about him until the childlike empress looks at him, but in the story says, Bastian, please. And so he goes to the window and shouts out her new name. And all of a sudden,
which is like Moon Unit Dweezil or something.
No, it's Moonchild. And I've got some history on that. I truly believe, because the filmmakers had to know that no one could hear what he was shouting. If you've read the book, you know the name, because it's said in the book. And so that's the only reason I know the name. Because even if you watch it with subtitles on now, it says like garbled shouting. And I think that the filmmakers decided it was better if we filled in our own name.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because the name sounds more magical in German.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Because it's not, okay, I don't really remember. It's like Mondkind would be Moonchild in German. Mm-hmm. This was like Mondenkind, which is kind of like a fake way of making it sound old. So it would be kind of more like Child of the Moon in English, but there's no way of making it sound like...
There's like an archaic component to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, shouts out the name.
The name. All of a sudden, Bastian finds himself with the Empress. And all that is left of Fantasia is her and a single grain of sand. And she tells him that for every wish he makes, Fantasia will grow bigger and more beautiful than it ever was. And so that he can recreate it. And so the movie ends with him riding Falkor and seeing everything as if the Nothing never was. He then asks Falkor to take him to scare the bullies who scared him at the beginning. And they jump into the trash can that he was in. And the narrator ends with, he made many more wishes and there were many more adventures, but that's a story for another time. And that's how it ends. So there's a lot there. So let me start with why Michael Ende hated this.
Yeah, let's start there.
So the 90 minutes that we see is the first half of the Neverending Story. There is a full second half about Bastian's adventures in Fantasia. It's actually Fantastica is the name of it in the book. And something that was skipped over that they did not make clear in the movie is that when Fantasians are taken by the nothing, they become lies in the real world.
Oh.
And Gmork, when Atreyu confronts him, says, why would you help the nothing? And he said, because the nothing takes hopes and dreams, and people without hopes and dreams are easy to control. And whoever has control has power. And so kind of those things together, the fact that a lack of hopes and dreams and a preponderance of lies makes people ripe to being controlled by an authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what End was going for here. He had a very specific message he wanted to create. In the second half of the book, which I have read, but it's been 30 years. I was probably about 13 or 14 when I read it. So I don't remember the details that well. I just remember little bits of it. What Bastian doesn't know at the beginning is that every time he makes a wish, he loses a memory of the real world.
While he's in Fantasia?
While he's in Fantasia.
Oh, so he's repopulating, but severing his ties to his...
And then he is described as overweight and bow-legged and short for his age in the book. And so one of his first things that he does in Fantasia is to make himself look the way he wants to look. Whereas, Barrett Oliver is, the kid playing
adorable
Bastian.
10-year-old. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So over time, he decides, while he is in Fantasia, the Childlike Empress disappears. And so he decides to become the emperor, the Childlike Emperor, because he must be the right person for it because he has the Orin. And so he becomes an authoritarian himself and ends up fighting Falkor and Atreyu and his friends. So there's
That's
something...
dark.
Yeah. And he ends up going to... the only two things he remembers are his name and his father, I think.
He doesn't even remember his mother, who he named the Empress after?
No, because he loses all his memories. And Atreyu ends up saving him, helping him remember his name. And then he decides to go back to the real world and he becomes himself again. But he goes to the Hall of Old Emperors, and it's all the humans who got stuck in Fantasia like he did and became authoritarians.
Wow.
So there's a lot there. And I was reading some, again, because I read this as a child and it's been years, and I did not have time to reread the book before we recorded. But it's pretty clear that Michael Ende is trying to say two very distinct things about authoritarianism. One is that a lack of hope can lead to agreeing to be an authoritarian, but then also an over-reliance on a view of yourself that is aggrandized, like self-aggrandizing view of yourself, also leads to authoritarianism. So he's looking at it both from like the people who are willing to be led by an authoritarian and then the people who become an authoritarian. And I suspect that's why he had such a problem with the movie, because that is not in there.
Yeah, the second one for sure isn't.
I
feel like there's also, based on just what you've said, because I haven't read at all, but it seems to me that there's also something about it's not bad people that become authoritarian, but that it's in there, it's in all of us kind of a thing.
Yes.
Like I'm feeling a sense of that as well. Although it's interesting, the gates from when we were going to see the Oracle, is that from the book? Because those are kind of interesting too, to juxtapose with the fact that it's there in all of us. The brave person finds himself a coward and the kind person finds himself actually cruel. And also you need to actually believe that you can do it in order to, like, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
It feels like a major balancing act if we're trying to take instruction from Mr. N's mythology here.
And based on, I've read Momo also more recently, but not that much more recently. It's been about 20 years ago. That one is a similar sort of thing. There are men in bowler hats who try to convince people to save time And by saving time, they lose everything that's important. I just, time is like they're flowers. They're like time lilies. And so instead of just allowing them to grow, by saving time, they end up being like made into basically tobacco that the men in the bowler hats smoke. It's just an amazing metaphor. That I really, really, I think Michael Ende was a phenomenal talent. And I can comprehend why he was not happy with the film. But I also think that there's more to it than it wasn't his story.
Right.
It was inspired by his story.
Right. But it was still a net good, I think, in your opinion.
Yes. So for that, because, the anti-authoritarian idea, I did not get. I mean, that is not something that's in there. Although you do have that important moment when Gmork says people without hopes and dreams are easy to control, which stuck with me from childhood. Mm-hmm. It seems to be more of a metaphor of depression, particularly considering his father. We get one scene with Major Dad, and like the thing that stuck with me is he makes himself a smoothie with a raw egg in it.
Gross. Okay. It's like Gaston. Okay.
Yeah. But he is compartmentalizing his grief to the point where he's ignoring his own child's like reaching out and grief. Yeah. The way the swamps of sadness take in Artax and there is nothing that Atreyu can do. Yes.
And if it weren't for luck in a very literal sense, then Atreyu would have been lost as well. Yeah.
And then the fact that the big bad is nothing is it's pretty overwhelming stuff for a child's movie.
I mean, each of the ones, even the rock fighter that I remembered and the big strong hands, like that really feels like depression talking as well to me.
Well, It gets back to the first gate. You have to believe that you can. And that is I believed my strength was in my ability to hold things, my hands, my bulk, the fact that I'm a giant creature.
Right.
And it's completely comprehensible why the rockbiter has that reaction.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I thought that I was this big, strong thing. And what I see is that I am nothing compared to the nothing. So, it's both of those gates.
Even you and I have talked in other places about sort of that, what I'm realizing is fairly universal sense that if others saw our true selves, that we would be rejected. So that the second gate being the mirror that you can see who you truly are, and that it is terrifying. Like that also feels like a potent metaphor for mental health and self-perception, etc.
Well, and what is interesting to me is as a kid, it was clear to me that Atreyu made it past that gate because he was confused, not terrified.
Yep.
And so the fact that he is a fictional character being read by a small boy who is really having a tough time is there's just this weird metaphor within a metaphor within a metaphor there. And it also means, like, for Bastian, who he really is Atreyu, because he can see him at that moment.
Maybe it's very complicated.
Yeah. It's a lot for a kids movie.
It is a lot. Its inspiration was this anti-authoritarian from someone who survived Nazi Germany. So
yes, and his father was a painter who had all of his paintings destroyed by the Third Reich. There's like one piece that survived because it was considered to be, like, I don't know, antithetical, whatever that is they called.
Yeah, un-American, but the German version.
Yeah. And so it's really fascinating to think about how Michael Ende's life story fits into this.
Or metaphors from it show up. Yeah,
yes.
That's really interesting.
So the more overt lesson from this film that is, I don't think it's not in the book, but it's much more clear in the film and much more what they were going for, is the role of the reader in creating story. And that was what gave me goosebumps as a child, and still did when I watched it recently with my kids. At the end, the childlike empress is telling Atreyu he hasn't failed because the boy was with you as you did all of that, just as others were with him when he hid from the bullies in the bookshop. And so that's us. We were with Bastian. And she goes on to say that is the never-ending story that, creates all of this life. In the novel, Bastian actually still refuses to name her at that moment. And so she goes to the old man on Wandering Mountain, who keeps a record of everything that happens in Fantasia, and asks him to read the story. And it starts at the beginning with what Bastian has read and continues on until we get to that point and then starts over again. And so it's never ending that way until he finally says, I have to name her or this will go on forever. And I am not going to say I prefer that the version from the movie. It's more familiar to me because I watched the movie so many times and I only read the book maybe twice. But the idea that we have agency as readers and viewers was such an important one for me as a kid. And the meta analysis of what it means to engage with a story. It's a gift. It's a gift from my childhood. It is something that I always love when I see it in other art. And it is something that I truly believe in. As we talked about, I think in our bonus episode about Monster at the End of This Book, I really believe that the reader concludes the loop of creating art, written art. There is no completion without someone to read it. And so the reader has responsibility and obligation and power. And I think that's remarkable. And it's not a very specific message set very specifically in the 20th century after an atrocity. It is a little more timeless. And so again, I'm completely sympathetic to Michael End's displeasure at losing the message he very specifically wanted to say, but I can't regret the message we got.
Yeah, there is something unique and special about the kind of relationship. I think that every relationship is separate and different from the two individuals or more who are sharing it. Like that, there is something in the bond that I believe is distinct from the individuals, but it has a texture and a depth that is completely different when we're talking about the reception and interpretation of art, the relationship between the artist and the viewer, or the author and the reader, contains the full bulk of the story that is their bond. And there's something really special and magical about that I'm with you. It's powerful. It's powerful. And it's not about, resisting authoritarianism.
Yeah. Something I read, I did a little bit of research, different critiques and reviews. And the way that this one writer put it that I really appreciated was talked about how Bastian, because he is not a character in the book that he is reading, has agency. Whereas the characters in the Neverending Story don't, because they have already been written. They don't have agency, which is why he is able to name the Childlike Empress, and a character who lives in Fantasia would not be able to. And I was like, that is phenomenal. That really, really hit me. Now, having said that, got to get to the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
There are two named female characters. There's the Childlike Empress, Moonchild. We never find out what her previous name was. And then there's Urgel, Enguiwuk's wife. Those are the only two named female characters. They do not talk to each other. And I read something this morning in preparation for this, it was a woman talking about how she'd loved this movie as a child. She thought Atreyu was a girl when she was little, which I can kind of understand.
Yeah, longish hair.
And Noah Hathaway is very pretty. I had a crush on him as a kid. I can remember when I was a kid, Dad saying something along the lines of like, he thought that they got one actor to play Atreyu and Bastian because they looked so alike. And I was like, what are you talking about? They look nothing alike.
That's funny.
So this blogger I was reading was saying she went to like a costume party or something like that as Atreyu. And so someone said to her, like, you can't be Atreyu. He's a boy. You're a girl. And so she's like, so I'm stuck being this child in a tower who's crying and waiting for the boys to come save her. And I'm like, oh, ouch. Yeah. And she has more agency in the book in that when Bastian still refuses to name her, she says, okay, I know what I can do now, and goes to save herself and the rest of Fantastica. But we get nothing like that.
She's a sexy lamp who needs a new name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that like the other thing that I really remember from watching it was the beauty of the child actors, all three of them. I mean, they are all three very, very beautiful children, but especially Tammy Stronach, who played the Childlike Empress, is very much emphasized, like with the makeup that she's wearing and the head, like the tiara that has the one pearl. She looks amazing. And they did like this phenomenal job in terms of the what you can do with filmmaking for making her seem ethereal. But it doesn't change the fact that she's born yesterday, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of gender representation.
No. And that's something that, now reading that blogger, I had no problem seeing myself as Atreyu or Bastian when I watched the movie. Like the fact that they were boys did not interfere with my ability to see myself as either one
I
of them.
definitely was Bastian.
Yeah. But at the same time, shouldn't have to do that with every movie from my childhood.
Right.
So it's an interesting movie to revisit. I mean, watching it with my kids, they were 12 and 9 when we watched it. They've since had birthdays, but they were like, way to green screen. And so there are definitely
the snark is strong with this one.
Yes. So there's definitely some magic lost in the aging of the special effects. But the idea that, you know, if you find the right book, you could find this path into a world that only you can get to is really, really amazing. My older son wanted to read the book after having seen this. He's like, this sounds amazing. This sounds great. And this is kind of an odd, amorphous thought, but I'm thinking about the responsibility Michael Ende felt because he wanted this specific message and it was not made clear in the film. Then there's the responsibility of Wolfgang Petersen. This was his first English language film. He had made Das Boot. He also made Enemy Mine. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, we should put that on the list.
We should. And I think Air Force One, he made several fairly well-known movies. So he took a different responsibility from Michael Ende, but what he did was like shepherd the magic, like, and made it clear in a way that really resonated with a lot of children. And then, you know, the responsibility of the characters. I mean, the way that it's set up when he finds the book in the bookshop, Mr. Coriander says, you know, this isn't safe. It's not for you, which is also very clearly, you need to read this, of pushing kids in the direction they need to go when they need to go there.
So that's an interesting thing. Like, let's actually stay there for a second because, right, so this kid is dealing with grief, you know, having lost his mom and feeling not the support that he needs from his dad, who's dealing with his own grief in a different way. So he needs this story. Okay. But he also, like, what are the consequences now of him? Like, Ende was talking about trade-offs in the way that you described the book. Like, Mr. Coriander has effectively made it so that Bastian will cut school. I mean, he's at least cutting class, if not school, because he's in the school building. So I suppose that's not exactly cutting school, but he's not in class, right? And he's struggling in school, and obviously our grades are not the be all end all, and also, completely blowing them off and ignoring them is also not. It will have consequences, I guess. So that's sort of an interesting.
Well, and the idea that you can lose yourself in something, whether it's fiction or movies or video games or whatever it is, particularly when you're grieving or feeling depressed, there's a fine line between when that is a healthy way of dealing with grief or whatever you're dealing with, and it being a way to escape.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's exactly what I'm trying to get at, because I feel like there are many times when there are emotions that we need to feel, and we have a hard time accessing them, and art helps us access them, helps us to like find them, and so that we can express them. It's hard to express grief about mom's death because it's too fresh for Bastian, and so he's able to find the loss of the Artax, the horse, and express the grief through tears that maybe weren't coming and needed to be shed. Awesome. But ultimately, I feel like the other side of that is a return to one's life in a healthier, more balanced, less repressed, less whatever kind of way. Well, and it sounds like, especially from the novel, that's not at all what this led to.
Eventually it does. He is able to, at the end, he and his father are able to like talk. His father is able to cry in front of him. Like it does eventually. Okay. And I actually feel like, so the end of the movie is Falkor in the real world scaring his bullies.
Right.
And in some ways that feels like a fantasy that's, just like, wouldn't it be great if? And as I read this morning, they didn't know how to end the movie because, again, it's the halfway point for the book. And so they kind of came up with that. Narratively, it makes a neat bow. It starts with the bullies, it ends with the bullies. It starts with him running, it ends with him triumphant. But I think if we look at it in terms of what has he gained from the book that he can take with him into the real world, we can see that as a metaphor for it. Even though it's not him actually standing up to his bullies as his 10-year-old self, it is him being able to imagine a world in which he does not need to be afraid of these boys anymore.
Right. And maybe it is, in fact, because the luck dragon doesn't exist in our world. But if that scene was actually a metaphor for him standing up to his bullies. Yeah.
And so I liked the ending as a kid. I never really thought much about it.
Sure.
I liked the symmetry of it.
Yeah.
My little storyteller heart as a child liked the symmetry of it. And I think they did a very nice job in that sense. I can also see why, if you're thinking of it as like, okay, so he's just basically catatonic and imagining he's in this, fantasy world. That's kind of a grim ending. But you can also see it, since so much of this film is metaphor, as a metaphor of him like taking the courage and the enthusiasm that this book gave him and the agency this book gave him and using it in the real world. I think that's a far better ending than they could have come up with if him just being in Fantasia at the end.
Agreed. Yeah. I'm like, in my head, I'm sort of writing the like next chapter where, his grades are suffering because he didn't turn them in, but then I don't know, maybe he's able to actually talk to the teacher, the math teacher, about dealing with grief. But that's in my head. That's not, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So one other thing I want to mention about Moonchild, and this is more of a fun fact than anything else. Aleister Crowley wrote a novel called Moonchild.
Oh, the magic guy.
Yes.
With a K.
And extreme leftist, I guess.
I don't know much about him.
Neither do I, other than that, he's the occult guy. The novel was about good and bad magicians. And the good magicians were trying to bring a moon child into the world by impregnating a woman. Does not sound very feminist, but and Michael Ende had a copy of that book in his library. So the name Moonchild likely was inspired by that.
Is Crowley British?
Yes. So it just kind of blew my mind, like when I read that. Because, I think Moonchild, 1960s hippies.
Well, obviously, like I was naming Frank Zappa's kids' names. So that's where I was. Yeah.
And in turn, I find out it's 6 degrees of good omens because
right, totally, Aleister Crowley. And magicians, I will be doing research on this.
So, and the novel was written in 1917, but wasn't published until the 20s. And there was some response to World War I in that novel as well. So it's just very interesting to me where these things come from. And it gets back to why I was glad as a child I never knew the name, because I do have mental connections. I've connotations with Moonchild that had I known that as a kid, I think it would have taken away some of the magic. So as soon as I read the book, because it's in the book, I saw it. But by that point, the movie was firmly lodged in my mental furniture.
Yeah. All right. Any other insights you want to share before we wrap up?
One more really weird fun fact. So Noah Hathaway, who played Atreyu, was in a movie called Trolls 2, where he played a character named Harry Potter.
Whoa.
I know. I don't think any of these 3 actors continued acting. Barrett Oliver was in, what was the name of that movie? It's not The Last Starfighter. It's Daryl or something like that, where he's a
Daryl. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a couple other movies. I think Tammy Stronach never did anything else acting. She was a dancer. Noah Hathaway owned a bar and was a tattoo artist, and is still extraordinarily beautiful. But it's interesting. The same sort of I tend to have 6 degrees of anything I'm interested in, and so finding out where people end up is also something I tend to get into.
So let me see if I can synthesize some of the things that we talked about, and you can fill in where I missed. So Neverending Story, well, quickly, the thing that we always talk about, does not pass the Bechdel test. Sadly, very little gender representation. And in fact, the Childlike Empress, very little agency, at least in the movie. I'm just getting that out of the way. But the bigger piece of the analysis that I heard from you on this movie was twofold. One was about the manifold metaphors and analogy for mental health struggles that are sort of baked into the storyline, from the swamps of sadness that sort of envelop to the big bad. The actual villain in this story is the nothing, which is a really poignant metaphor for depression, in my opinion, in our opinion. I'm agreeing with you actually here. And then the other piece that is powerful for you, which I think is going to be a trend on Deep Thoughts, is the role of the reader or consumer of media in its creation, and the consequent obligations, responsibilities, power that come from that role in the creation. One interesting fact about this piece of media, those were the things that this piece of media, as it exists, as we received it as a movie in 1980, whatever, are really interesting, and not at all the primary message that the original author, Michael Ende, was trying to convey, where in the novel, in fact, it was much stronger message about the danger of authoritarianism, about how hopeless people are easy to control, and that becoming an authoritarian through self-aggrandizement or just sort of continuing to allow one to take the power is a danger in everyone. Those things, from a German survivor of Nazi Germany, are missing from the movie, much to Mr. N's chagrin, apparently. Those are my big syntheses. What did I miss that you want to make sure that we leave in our conclusion here?
Just that the importance of imagination and storytelling in its own right. When Bastian's father is telling him to keep his feet on the ground and to be practical, he's telling him, like, get your head out of the clouds, stop drawing unicorns on your homework, because this is the real world and we need to do real things in it, and drink breakfast smoothies with raw eggs. And the movie rejects that. It rejects the idea that you have to choose one or the other. It is possible. I believe the movie is saying it is possible to do both. It is possible to live in the real world, but also keep your head in the clouds. It is possible to envelop yourself in fantasy when necessary, but be practical when necessary. And you don't need to give one or the other up. I think that's what the movie is saying. And I think that's really important, especially in terms of talking about mental health, because we do have this tendency. I mean, it's all of what we're doing here with Deep Thoughts is like, oh, it's just a book. It's just a movie. Like, don't take it so seriously. You need to work on your math homework. Well, it's that important. It is that important because it is what will help this child deal with his grief. It's that important because it's what will make the difference between a child who just kind of fades away into nothing and one who is able to reclaim himself and
stand up to his bullies.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what got the entire world who made it through COVID, got through COVID with art.
Yes.
We didn't do it from accounting tables.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was fun. I hadn't thought about that movie in a long time.
And Falcor is the best. I wanted my own Falcor so bad.
Oh my gosh, me too. Me too. So when we meet next time, I am going to be sharing with you my deep thoughts about Battlestar Galactica. Specifically the reboot, not the 70s version, but the one
with Tricia Helfer.
The one with Tricia Helfer.
Who has a cottage industry and not quite human characters.
Yes. That one. So I lived that Portlandia episode. Just binged the whole thing in a matter of weeks. So I'm looking forward to sharing my deep thoughts with you.
Very cool. Then. I'll see you then.
See you then. Hey, podcast listener. Yeah, you. A number of folks have been reaching out to us privately with their own memories or deep thoughts about our deep thoughts. Aaron told me that our brief conversation about Poltergeist in the Ghostbusters episode brought back some scary childhood memories. Marion, hi Mom, pointed out that Fred Savage's dad in The Princess Bride was probably at work and that we were maybe overthinking that idea. Jake pointed out to us that we had completely missed the negative and potentially harmful stereotypes of Roma people that underlie Robin Hood and Little John's cross-dressing as fortune tellers in Disney's Robin Hood. We want to hear what you're thinking, but I bet other listeners do too. We have a forum feature on our website at guygirlsmedia.com. Come join the conversation. I'll put the link in the show notes. Come on over. Let us know. What did we miss? What surprised you? Did we inspire any deep thoughts for you? Be in touch. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?